You could certainly argue that the jitters of today, where we eventually saw a loss of more than 300 points, but during the session lost close to 1,000 points, started with video of what was going on in Greece with a rather small protest, but nonetheless the tension was there. One man in particular over the past 3 weeks had been on Bulls and Bears and had specifically said, Europe is going to get very, very hot. You've got to be careful there.
Who was that man?
That was economic contrarian Mike Norman.
Finally, I get some credit.
But he doesn't have the stage all by himself. We also want to bring in Zephyr Management's Managing Director Jim Awad and Fox Business's Cody Willard and Dominic Tavella of Diversified Financial Consultants. But Mr. Norman.
Yes, that's right. I did.
Yes, that's right. I didn't know.
I got to get some credit. Finally, getting some credit. But listen, and I'll go on to say this. This crisis is not going away. And in particular, I'm struck today by the news out of the ECB. The ECB holds the key to this situation because the ECB can conduct basically a quantitative easing. They could buy the debt of Greece and enable those governments to have the euros to stimulate and get out of this in a more sensible fashion. But what the ECB said today is basically you're going to have to cut deficits. And this is not going to work. What's going to happen is you're going to have a collapse in economic activity, you're going to have soaring unemployment, and the irony is that the deficits are going to get bigger, and this will domino effect straight down through every country, eventually, if it's not addressed properly, hitting Germany.
Mike, not to make your head or ego explode, but it was 3 weeks ago that Mike Norman said, invest in DRR, which is the market vector's double euro short. It double shorted any drops in the euro, and what is it up today? I guess 12% total over since you recommended.
Right, and I still think, Liz, there's plenty of money to be made here. I don't see any reason why the euro can't go down to parity to $1 to €1. And in fact, I don't think it's wild to say that it could ultimately test the lows that it traded at in 2001, which was 80 cents to the dollar. So there's still a lot of money to be made in this trade.
Cody, you were shaking your head. I couldn't tell how.
I think I would. The main part I would take the other side of is, first of all, great call. I do full-on credit for that. But I think at this point, I think you probably want to take that money off the table. I think Greece is certainly a problem, and yes, there's a true economic crisis there. But the magnitude of it is just nothing compared to what we've already been through in the last 2-3 years. We used to talk about whether subprime was contained. You know what? We were talking about a multi-trillion-dollar private market that was global, had global investors and global banks all over. Yes, a lot of banks in Europe hold Greek debt, but it's only about $150 billion for the entire bailout package. We sent that much to AIG alone in this country.
Cody, I'm going to say, just let me take the other side of that, Cody, and that is that it goes beyond just Greece. What we are experiencing worldwide is a cyclical recovery, a not insignificant cyclical recovery, because they took all of the debt from the bad debt from the private sector and loaded it up on the public sector. So now we realize that it's the governments all over the world. You start with Greece, but go to all the pig countries, and then you go to even England and ultimately, the United States. Although we're going to be given a pass here because of the currency. But Jim, it's got to be paid off at some point.
But can't the governments, when it's a sovereign debt problem and not a private market debt problem, they can play so many games. They can start inflating their currency. They can do all the things that they do to kick the can down the road, and we can, quote unquote, contain it on a governmental level.
Hold on, we got another member of this team. Dom, go ahead. Dominic Tavella, go ahead.
I guess what really shocks me is what's different today than it was yesterday or a week ago or a month ago. I mean, this is not like we woke up this morning all of a sudden in Greece, was the first thing on the news. I mean, we have some guy throwing a rock in Greece and all of a sudden this market loses 1,000 points. I think we have to look at a bigger picture here and primarily what's going on in this economy. And yeah, Europe is going to be a big issue. It's going to be a big issue for a long time. I agree with Mike, but I don't think it's going to be the overwhelming issue in terms of what these markets are going to do.
I'm sure you heard, Dom, from your clients. Dom works out on Long Island and has a lot of wealthy clients. And I want to know, did they get nervous? We were having people saying that they were getting calls saying, just sell everything, I'm nervous, which is the exact wrong thing to do on a day like this.
the exact wrong thing to do. But Liz, I got to tell you honestly, we got a few calls today, but I think most of them are going to come tomorrow. But the truth of the matter is we've been on the phone with our clients for about a month, month and a half after the first quarter, saying to them, you know what, this market's gotten a little high. It's gotten a little bit ahead of itself based on what we thought the economy was going to do the balance of this year. Maybe it's a good time to pull a little assets off the table. Maybe it's time to put a little money in cash. Not big numbers, but 5–10% of the client's portfolio. So actually, we were waiting for something like this. And so I don't think we're going to get that many calls even tomorrow.
You know,
Mike, congratulations, by the way, on the pick and prognostications. You were right on in that point. The only country I would look at and say that doesn't fiddle with its numbers the way Greece and the pigs, and even you know, some of the more responsible countries like France do, is Germany. Does Germany survive this?
Well, that's a great question, because ultimately, if you see a cascading where the debt, the public sector debt now in Greece, we know it's collapsing. Next is Spain, Portugal, Italy. If the small group of remaining countries are called upon to bail out, you know, the debt is 3.5 times the GDP of Germany. So ultimately, you can have a default of the entire Eurozone debt, which would include putting Germany in a very precarious situation. I want to just touch quickly on something Dom said. He's right. It should not affect the United States because we are a sovereign currency issuing nation, which brings up the distinction, and I want to go back to Cody's point, they can't kick the can down the road because none of those countries issue currency anymore. This is a true payments crisis, and it could result in a banking crisis because they have no bank deposit insurance.
We will be right back with much more Fox Business on this record-setting day. Don't go away.